to base.
Copy that, Tokidoki leader. Stop picking at my ship, you jerk! Whoa! My donut UFO is delicious, but you're destroying the aerodynamics! Fine, have it your way. Suck my sprinkles!
Please, I have a family. Don't do this.
Oh, tell me more about this family.
This was essential for keeping the more experienced and honest members of the agency as far away from the crime scene as possible, while other agency insiders could be assigned to the investigations before their counterparts returned. Federal authorities such as FEMA and the CIA took immediate control over the crime scene and began whisking away evidence that very same night. Turner Construction, one of the primary contractors at Ground Zero, occupied the 38th floor of the North Tower and was involved in performing the fireproofing upgrades inside the towers. It has been noted that these upgrades were completed in the 3 years before 9/11 on floors that match up almost identically to the floors of impact and failure on 9/11. Once the cleanup was fully coordinated, the operations were consolidated under the control of two primary contractors, AMEC Construction Management and Bovis Lend-Lease. These are the two companies that were originally assigned to the areas of Ground Zero that included the North Tower, AMEC, and the South Tower, Bovis. A truly surprising fact is that at the time of the attacks on 9/11, AMEC had just completed a $258 million refurbishment of Wedge 1 of the Pentagon, which is exactly where American Airlines Flight 77 impacted that building. Arguments over the size of the hole of the Pentagon and whether it was a plane or a missile are, in my opinion, a convenient distraction from the much bigger picture of why that section of the building was targeted and by whom. On September 10, 2001, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld announced that $2.3 trillion in unadjusted funds were missing from the Pentagon budget. The very next day, the offices whose responsibility it was for tracking that money down were destroyed when American Airlines Flight 77 impacted that very section of the building. The only off-site backup for the Pentagon's black budget financial records was a secure federal office building in the World Trade Center complex. Strangely, it too was destroyed on 9/11. World Trade Center 7 was the largest CIA headquarters outside of Langley, Virginia, and housed offices involved in several large-scale federal investigations into massive stock market and accounting fraud. Not surprisingly, World Trade Center 7 was the first to be cleaned up and the evidence destroyed at Ground Zero. So if 9/11 was really an inside job, then let's take a look at some of the people inside the buildings that were targeted and destroyed on 9/11. In the impact zone of the North Tower was a company called Marsh & McLennan, which at the time was the world's largest insurance brokerage company. One of Marsh's executives was a guy named L. Paul Bremer, who was also the chairman of the Congressional National Commission on Terrorism from 1999 to 2000, and the U.S. Ambassador at Large for Counterterrorism from 1986 to 1989. Instead of going to work on the day of 9/11 and dying inside the towers with hundreds of his employees, Bremer decided to go on MSNBC and tell the world that Osama bin Laden was behind the attacks and possibly Iraq and Iran. And then he demanded
the most severe military response we can come up with.
L. Paul Bremer was called away from Marsh in 2003 to become the Iraq occupation governor, a role he has been widely criticized for. So Bremer not only worked inside the buildings, but had offices directly in the impact zone of the South Tower where Flight 175 would hit. He missed work on 9/11 to give us the official story on national television, and went on to be the Iraq occupation governor. You really can't get more connected to 9/11 than that. Oh wait, you can, sorry. I forgot to mention that Bremer was also the former manager for Kissinger Associates. He was a member of the board for Akzo Nobel, the parent of International Paint Company, which produced a fireproofing application for skyscrapers called Interchar. Bremer was also on the International Advisory Board for the Japanese mining and machinery company Komatsu, which at the time had been involved in a joint venture agreement with Dresser Industries, the oil services intelligence front where Prescott Bush Sr. and George H.W. Bush got their start with Neil Mellon. Anyway, the Komatsu Dresser Mining Division operated from 1988 to 1997, and in July 1996 it patented a nanothermite demolition device that could, quote, demolish a concrete structure at high efficiency while preventing a secondary problem due to noise, flying chips and dust, and the like. As many of you know, residues of thermite, a highly energetic chemical mixture, have been confirmed in samples of World Trade Center dust, and the use of thermite at the World Trade Center was also revealed by environmental data. See the description for more links and sources. Scientific Applications International Corporation, a defense contractor with expertise in thermite-related technologies, played a large part in the NIST World Trade Center investigation. A few other names and companies inside the Twin Towers also worthy of further investigation include Craig Stapleton, who is married to Bush's cousin Dorothy Walker Bush. Stapleton was the president of Marsh Real Estate Advisors from 1982 to 2001. He was a member of the board of directors for Cendant, that was charged with massive accounting fraud in 1998, and went on to join Winston Partners, a privately owned investment firm founded in 1993 and led by George W. Bush's brother Marvin. Other very powerful and well-connected people worked in senior management at Marsh. These included Stephen Friedman, a senior principal at Marsh Capital and former partner at Goldman Sachs, who later became George W. Bush's top economic advisor. Friedman was also a member of the Brookings Institution, the Bilderberg Group, the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, and the board at In-Q-Tel, the investment firm founded by the CIA in 1998. In-Q-Tel invests in state-of-the-art technologies related to defense and intelligence work, including nano and chemical technologies, according to its website. In another interesting coincidence, Friedman belonged through Cornell University to a secret society called Quill and Dagger, the membership of which includes Paul Wolfowitz, Sandy Berger, and Stephen Hadley. Wolfowitz, the neocon Deputy Secretary of Defense in the Bush administration, was the author in 1992 of the Wolfowitz Doctrine of preemptive warfare. He also made comments about a surprise like Pearl Harbor months before 9/11 and met with Pakistani ISI General Mahmoud Ahmed in the week before 9/11. Berger, the national security advisor to President Clinton, was later caught stealing documents from the 9/11 Commission investigation. Berger was also the boss of White House counterterrorism czar Richard Clarke, and together with Hadley, who was Condoleezza Rice's deputy, was responsible for delaying or obstructing Clarke's plans to stop al-Qaeda in January of 2001.
Is that Daddy, Mom? Please, not in front of my family.
No, you got it backwards. Spread the word. Donatella's UFO is off limits to
Fuck
broadcast.
you!
Figure 6 million people who've been killed, and 6 million people who've been killed in this long 40-year war that we've waged against the people of the Third World.
Iran-Contra took the Kissinger model to new heights. Never before had the military and intelligence agencies sought so many private sector sources of finance to such a degree. And in keeping with the distancing factor of the old British system of privateering, combined with the global arms industry market, the U.S. had no shortage of willing partners to needlessly kill for profit. The fact that it was done showed a new step in the magnitude and capacity for multinational covert activities completely divorced from moral limits or even common interests other than profit. Iran-Contra was a conspiracy. John Poindexter was convicted of conspiracy. Here we have a massive geopolitical covert operation done by a faction within the American government concentrated in the Office of the Vice President and the Department of Defense, working jointly with a faction in Israel to illegally sell arms and drugs in order to procure profits to pay off the Contras to fight the Sandinistas. And the entire time that the Americans and the Israelis are working together to do this, the Israelis were spying on the United States and stealing nuclear secrets. It wasn't until after Iran-Contra was busted that Jonathan Pollard was also ousted as a spy for Israel and thrown in jail. Later, in the build-up to 9/11, once again, we have a cabal within the U.S., concentrated in the Office of the Vice President and the Defense Department, working with Israel to set up this event. And the entire time, again, Israel was spying on the United States and stealing nuclear technology. And then if that isn't enough, the same men that whitewashed the investigation into Iran-Contra were chosen again to whitewash the investigation into 9/11. That is why I'm bringing up Iran-Contra and Israel. The war in Iraq wasn't based on mistaken intelligence, it was based on lies, known deceptions. However, if a person relies only on television, to tell them that Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction and there never was any evidence for that claim, that the U.S. had no real interest in liberating the Kurds or allowing a legitimate democracy, that they planned perpetual war from the start, that permanent bases were always part of the agenda, and that intelligence agencies intentionally fostered religious infighting, even going as far as posing to be one faction while murdering another to set off cycles of revenge killings. Then they will always be in the dark, because this is not going to be on television. The media doesn't report it. The media is owned by the Pentagon. They have overlapping board of directorates. It is one large corporation. They lie. People involved in Iran-Contra were also part of the continuity of government, an emergency backup government that became a shadow government. The Contra operation was run out of the Office of the Vice President by former CIA Director George Bush Sr. George Bush Sr. was the director when the CIA was preparing intelligence cells in Pakistan and Afghanistan to fight a proxy war with the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. Call them modern privateers.
In the early 1980s, bin Laden worked with operatives from U.S. intelligence, the Pakistani military, and Arab states. They ran a wide-ranging covert network that recruited and financed Muslim fighters to battle the Soviet army.
These units were used again to finance 9/11 hijackers, who were under the protection by top officials of Chertoff and Goss, who intentionally stifled FBI attempts to investigate members of these cells, thus assuring 9/11's success. The question is, did the privateers double-cross the U.S. in a form of blowback, or was it jointly planned? It was planned and assisted. Not only were the bagmen who financed the operation protected, the hijackers themselves were relocated 2 steps ahead of the FBI, thanks to the Israelis' phone taps and monitoring of both the feds and the hijackers themselves.
Some American terrorism investigators fear certain suspects in the September 11th attacks may have managed to stay ahead of them by knowing who and when investigators are calling on the telephone. And what troubles investigators most, particularly in New York in the counterterrorism investigation of the World Trade Center attack, is that on a number of cases, suspects that they had sought to wiretap and surveil immediately changed their telecommunications processes. They started acting much differently as soon as those supposedly secret wiretaps went into place.
They also monitored the airports and planes. Those were needed to explain and justify the event. The assured damage was done by bombs within the buildings. As you will see later, bombs and bombers were found on 9/11. The bombers were released, and the steel from the building was quickly destroyed, shipped off to China and India. There is no way this was done simply as a double cross. No one but the government itself would have the means to do something like run a drill of the exact scenario of 9/11 on 9/11 to assure that interceptors would be too far away and confused to stop the plane.
You let your UFO get ate by birds again? You know every time we fix it, we gotta bake a new donut. Cost us like $12 in ingredients.
I just killed a bunch of crows over $12?
You mean murder? You mean murder? You mean murder? You mean murder? A bunch of crows is called a murder of crows.
Oh.
We're breaking the conditioning! We're breaking the conditioning! We're breaking the conditioning!